Kickstarter. The best way to describe this platform is looking for gold in a landfill. The platform is host to many useless inventions, false promises, and products that don't deliver, but once in a blue moon, you'll find something incredible. Of course, I'm referring to the Combat Kitchenware, baby. It's great for scrambling eggs and anyone who tries to break into my home. Dying pan aside, Kickstarter has spawned a few good products, including video games, but the one I want to talk about today is the ultimate love letter to retro gaming, Shovel Knight. Video games have existed for a long time now, and as technology progresses, so do the games that get produced. As hardware became more powerful, video games looked much better, but then human beings decided to regress and we went right back to the squares. There comes a point when people feel nostalgia, a sentimentality for the past, and this happens with things like movies, music, and of course, games. You'll frequently see people reminisce about the good times they had when they were younger. In comes Shovel Knight, a game made in the style of the classic NES platformers from days gone by on newer hardware. Developed by Yacht Club Games, Shovel Knight was first announced on March 17, 2013, along with a Kickstarter. This Kickstarter raised over 300,000 USD, over quadrupling the original funding goal of $75,000 and reaching all of the stretch goals. The original game eventually released on June 26, 2014 to overwhelming success. Either people were digging the unique concept, or they really had a thing for shovels. The stretch goals included 3 additional campaigns focusing on some of the boss characters, and which boss characters the campaigns focused on were decided on by a poll. Yeah, everyone gravitated towards the edgy one. We ended up with Shovel of Hope, the original campaign, Plague of Shadows, Specter of Torment, and King of Cards, and along with a platform fighting game called Shovel Knight Showdown, they're bundled together as Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. I'll be giving each of the campaigns, Showdown, and Treasure Trove as a whole a score out of 10. I'll cover what stays consistent throughout the campaigns in the section for Shovel of Hope. This is all my opinion, so please don't kill me if I think Shovel Knight's left elbow isn't to my liking. With that out of the way, let's get into it. Shovel of Hope follows Shovel Knight, who, while adventuring at the Tower of Fate with his partner Shield Knight, faces the power of a cursed amulet and finds himself outside, tower sealed, and Shield Knight gone. While Shovel Knight retreated to a life of solitude, the Enchantress formed the Order of No Quarter, a group of 8 villainous knights who apparently got 25 cents stolen from them, and they reopened the tower. With that, Shovel Knight embarks on his quest to find Shield Knight. Shovel Knight, true to his name, is equipped with his Shovel Blade. The Shovel Blade is both a shovel and a weapon. It can be used to dig up treasure, the currency in Shovel Knight, or hit enemies with either the short-ranged melee attack or Shovel Knight's now iconic Shovel Drop, which allows him to bounce off of enemies. Wow, a 3-for-1 special, a shovel, a weapon, and a pogo stick. Shovel Knight is satisfying to play as and is simple to understand, which leaves more room to master his movement as well as better connects him to his inspirations. Shovel Knight takes place in the generically named Valley, which is navigated through a map. Each level houses a boss, which is either one of the 8 members of the Order of No Quarter, or Shovel Knight's rival Black Knight, who is also fond of gardening tools. Each level has a different theme, enemies, and gimmicks, but they all follow the same go from point A to point B formula. The level design is spectacular. I find that some platformers which don't have much level variety feel like a slog to play through. Having new enemies and gimmicks keeps each level interesting and give a new challenge to overcome. At the end of each level is the boss battle, and each boss has a different battle style and attacks they'll throw at you. You'll probably die a few dozen times, but what makes it fun is learning the boss's patterns and finally kicking their ass. As you progress, you can upgrade your health, your shovel, change up your armor, which gives Shovel Knight different attributes, and obtain relics, which are secondary weapons and tools for Shovel Knight. For example, the Flare Wand allows Shovel Knight to shoot a long-range ball of fire, the Throwing Anchor lets you do your best Simon Belmont impression, and the Fishing Rod is the ultimate tool of destruction. Unlike most games, these are completely optional, and most of them are kinda useless, and then there's the Phase Locket, which makes you invincible for a few seconds. Yeah, that tore the f***ing game in half. Relics use magic, which can be replenished through magic jars scattered throughout levels, and Shovel Knight's maximum magic can also be upgraded, which allows for maximum Phase Locket spam. Using the Phase Locket made me forget a word, one that starts with D and ends with difficulty. Wonder what it is. It's very clear where Shovel Knight took inspiration. There are 8 bosses with the same title and differently themed stages like Mega Man. Shovel Knight's Shovel Drop is inspired by Link's Sword Drop in Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. The relic system is similar to Castlevania's sub-weapon system, and the map is reminiscent of Super Mario Bros. 3's map. What makes Shovel Knight great is that it takes what worked from these classic games and ditched what didn't, which makes it feel fresh, gives it its own identity, and in my opinion, perfects the 2D platforming genre. NES titles are known to be unforgivingly difficult, reaching the level of there being an entire fucking song whose title literally translates to "I cannot defeat Airman." It's an old Japanese meme song, and I'm gonna be honest, it's actually really good. Shovel Knight doesn't take away challenge, it just makes that challenge fair and less intrusive to the experience. It never felt like that the game's mechanics or physics screwed me over. All of the deaths I had felt like it was a mistake that I made. Old games had infrequent checkpoints, but with Shovel Knight, there's usually around 5 in a level that are placed reasonably, but if you want more challenge, you can destroy them and it gives you some extra treasure. There's armor that removes enemy knockback, but reduces your traction so none of this bullshit ever happens, and you get to feel like Luigi. Instead of a live system, Shovel Knight has a similar mechanic to Dark Souls where you lose some of your treasure upon death, which can be recovered at the location you died. The writing in Shovel Knight is pretty great. The story is kept very simple, which is to keep in line with NES titles back when video game stories were near non-existent outside of the manuals. There were many moments that got me laughing, and I was entertained by the dialogue from characters like Shovel Knight, the Order of No Quarter, and the random NPCs. My favorite NPC dialogue comes from Croaker, a frog who just tells you bad puns. There's an achievement for listening to them all. A pixelated frog telling puns. How riveting. Shovel Knight has the best 8-bit graphics I've seen. Yacht Club Games approached Shovel Knight with the idea of, what if development for the NES never stopped? Shovel Knight is faithful to the NES, using the NES's available color palettes aside from a few added colors, but has features that add to the experience that a regular NES game wouldn't have, like parallax scrolling and widescreen support. I honestly forget that Shovel Knight's art style is based on classic NES titles because it just looks so good. NES sprites weren't bad, they were just either very simple or left a lot up to interpretation. Now Ridley on the other hand looks like a weird chicken ostrich hybrid, I don't know what they were going for. Shovel Knight is polished to the absolute maximum with nothing looking out of place, and the colors and sprite work for characters, level design, and the backgrounds especially look fantastic. Shovel Knight's soundtrack is done mostly by Jake Kaufman, who also did the OST for titles like Shantae, Half Genie Hero, and DuckTales Remastered. There's 2 tracks, the music in the Explodatorium and the music in the Iron Whale, which were actually done by Manami Matsumae, who helped compose the music for the original Mega Man soundtrack. Shovel Knight's OST is chiptune perfection. It captures how it feels to be in these locations while sounding incredible. I have some of the tracks playing in the background of this video, but I highly recommend just playing the game or listening to the soundtrack. It's definitely worth your time. I give Shovel of Hope a 9 out of 10. Shovel Knight is a wonderful game full of charm, memorable moments, and little touches that make the experience even better. One of my personal favorites is the dancer in the bar. She promises her greatest reward to whoever defeats Specter Knight, and then just... It takes almost a full minute to complete, it's unskippable, and the great reward is a sheet of paper. The developers spent time animating this shit, you're watching all of it. This goes for all the other campaigns as well, but Shovel Knight doesn't have a tutorial because it doesn't need one. The game wordlessly explains what you have to do through level design in a way that doesn't need endless text boxes and doesn't break away from the experience. Shovel of Hope has some level of replayability with the optional collectible music sheets that you can return to the bard. He plays you the game's OST, which is neat. How he plays music that requires multiple instruments with just a lute is beyond me. There's also New Game Plus, which actually adds some challenge to the game by making you take twice as much damage and giving you fewer checkpoints and healing items. There's a bonus body swap mode introduced in Treasure Trove, which allows you to swap the gender and pronouns for some of the characters, and oh my god, finally a body swap mode that is actually tasteful. The designs for the body swapped characters still retain the same aesthetics as their original designs, and thank fucking god I don't have to see King Knight in a battle bikini. The only criticisms I have are on Shovel Knight's left elbow and the relic system. Shovel Knight's left elbow just isn't elbowy enough for me, but relics are more important than the part of you that people won't shut up about being greasy. Outside of the Phase Locket, which is the Phase Locket, the Propeller Dagger, which can save you from a fall, and the Flare Wand, which is actually pretty good, the other relics are all really situational. I'm pretty sure I used the Warhorn once when I first got it, and then it just became a dust collector. I tried not to use the Phase Locket unless I was really having trouble, and man, it feels cheap when you can just turn invincible before something hits you, but it works. Overall, Shovel of Hope was a great introduction to Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and it's what I believe to be the best throwback NES title out there. Plague of Shadows stars Plague Knight, who, despite being a member of the Order of No Quarter, has his own plans. Plague Knight's goal is to create a potion of unlimited power, but to do so, he must take the essence of each of the Order of No Quarter and Shovel Knight. What are essences? Who knows? The game never elaborates, so I'll just assume that essences are candies and the knights are made of sugar. Mole Knight probably tastes like a gumdrop. Story-wise, Plague of Shadows takes place at the same time as Shovel of Hope, but from the perspective of Plague Knight. Plague Knight plays very differently from Shovel Knight. Plague Knight jumps lower than Shovel Knight, but to compensate, he has a small double jump, and by small, I mean that it won't help Plague Knight reach the top shelf to get his cookies. Plague Knight isn't just lacking in physical strength, he's also lacking in gardening equipment. Instead, Plague Knight says f*** it and just blows everything up. Plague Knight's main gimmick is that he can customize his bombs. You can customize the casing, powder, and fuse of bombs. The casing changes the throwing trajectory, the powder changes the explosion, and the fuse changes how the bomb detonates. I mostly just stuck to default bombs since they were the most reliable, and only changed them in very specific scenarios like an airborne enemy or for the tougher stationary enemies and bosses. Plague Knight can't exactly thrust his bombs downward and bounce off of them without, so instead, holding the button to throw bombs allows him to charge a bomb burst, which launches him up and into the direction that you hold. Combined with his double jump, Plague Knight can travel some impressive distances. I'm telling you guys, he's got the mask not because he's a plague doctor, but because he's a bird. Despite his lower jumps, Plague Knight has far better mobility than Shovel Knight, and is much more destructive to play as. If you compare the destructive power of bombs and a shovel, it's obvious which would win. In fact, Plague Knight doesn't have much trouble with the bosses at all, since his bombs are so powerful and quick. Most of the challenge, as usual, comes from the platforming, especially during the early parts of the game when you're not so used to Plague Knight's gameplay and bomb burst him into a hole. Instead of relics, Plague Knight uses Arcana. You can get Arcana by finding the relics that Shovel Knight uses in new areas, and then trading them to Chester in each level, who then sells it to Shovel Knight. It's a neat little bit of continuity. The Arcana use a power bar which regenerates over time. Once again, I only used one and didn't touch the rest. The Vat acts as a temporary platform and saves you from damn near all of the platforming sections. Plague Knight also gets health tonics, which are found in levels and can temporarily increase his maximum health. Each level follows a different theme and has different gimmicks, but they all follow the same go from point A to point B formula. You might have noticed that I just copied over what I said for Shovel of Hope, because Plague of Shadows copies over Shovel of Hope's levels. There are a few moments where you can definitely tell the area was designed specifically for Shovel Knight. It makes sense that Plague Knight would go through the same levels as Shovel Knight since the two campaigns take place at the same time, but it feels like missed potential to not have levels that take advantage of Plague Knight's unique and fun gameplay, and instead just have the same levels, but you could just fly over it instead. There are very few differences to Plague of Shadows' progression, like how you fight Shovel Knight in the Explodatorium now. He fights like a player does and uses relics and everything. After defeating him and almost claiming his essence, he gets back up and beats your ass. And then teabags you. Count your days, Shovel Boy. To get revenge for the teabagging, Plague Knight steals Shovel Knight's essence while he's sleeping. The biggest difference with progression is with the village. While Shovel Knight is allowed in, Plague Knight isn't because he's a criminal, so he instead enters the Potionarium, a secret base underneath the village. There, Plague Knight has his minions, the mailman, a talking horse, oolong, and his own big titty goth GF. Alright, hey Siri, directions to nearest Potionarium. It's in the Potionarium that Plague Knight can pick up supplies and upgrades. He can buy health tonics and trade in music sheets here for Plague of Shadow specific tracks, or tracks related to Plague Knight. The most important NPC down here is Mona, who provides you with some permanent health upgrades, but more importantly, sells you customizations for your bombs and your bomb burst. You can unlock more bomb customizations by trading her cipher coins, which are plentiful in the game's levels, and then buy them with treasure. Mona was actually in Shovel of Hope as a random NPC who runs a minigame, but she gets a major role in Plague of Shadows. I really like how previously trivial NPCs get explored in the new campaigns. It helps a lot with world building and creates some great and memorable characters. Speaking of, the writing in Plague of Shadows is just lovely. Compared to Shovel Knight, Plague Knight is a massive dick, so most of the interactions between him and the other knights involve some shit-talking, Plague Knight pulling a Michael Jackson, and then throwing hands. There are many silly and funny moments, like receiving love advice from a horse, and even cute moments between Plague Knight and Mona. I'd say they've got a lot of chemistry. My favorite moment is Plague Knight learning to dance from the Troupple King, which can be activated by holding down. This can be used almost anywhere, no matter how inappropriate the situation is. I give Shovel Knight Plague of Shadows a 7 out of 10. Man, if only there were new levels. Plague Knight is a blast to play as, and the story is great, but going through the exact same levels as Shovel Knight, it's like playing through a Mario game as Sonic the Hedgehog. Except Sonic fucking explodes. I played Plague of Shadows right after Shovel of Hope, so it's just like, okay, time for the flying machine again, ugh. I love how Plague Knight plays. He's super satisfying, and the bombs and the bomb burst make enough of a difference that I still enjoyed Plague of Shadows a lot, but if Plague of Shadows had its own unique levels utilizing Plague Knight's unique capabilities, it would easily be one of, if not my favorite campaign, especially since I love the characters so much. Plague of Shadows is great, but could have been better. Specter of Torment follows Specter Knight and takes place before Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows. Specter Knight is tasked by the Enchantress to recruit the Order of No Quarter, and only when he has done so can his magical keepsake locket restore his humanity. Specter of Torment is very different from Shovel of Hope. The game goes full Mega Man, and you can pick to start with any level instead of choosing between 2 or 3 per quadrant of the valley. Each level is redesigned to fit Specter Knight's attributes and playstyle. Specter Knight jumps lower than Shovel Knight, much like Plague Knight does, but can scale certain walls and perform wall jumps, as well as break blocks by just jumping. Specter Knight's unique attack is the Dash Slash. If you're in the air, a gash will appear on the target. Attacking while there's a gash on the target will cause Specter Knight to dash through it with his scythe in the most anime way possible. The Dash Slash is used for both combat and platforming purposes. You can aim it upward or downward depending on if you're above or below the target. The Dash Slash is incredibly satisfying and looks really cool, and combined with his wall climbing, creates unique and more precise platforming compared to Shovel and Plague Knight, yet is still very intuitive and simple to understand. Like Plague Knight, Specter Knight gets a slight redesign and new sprites. Specter Knight's cloak no longer covers most of his body, and he is permanently slouching to match Shovel Knight's height. Alright, so Specter of Torment gets a 0 out of 10 for promoting bad posture. Specter Knight also has items called Curios. They're obtained by trading red skulls, the main collectible, to red. And this time, they're actually helpful. I found uses for all of the Curios, and they all look really fucking cool, like creating a mirror clone of himself, a powerful slash with a claw, a scythe that travels against whatever surface it was thrown on, and the most badass attack there is, the Judgment Rush. It's not too accurate against bosses, but it can sometimes be used to fly past parts of levels, and it's just too cool looking not to use. Even though all the Curios are helpful, of course, there's 2 that are better than the others. The Hover Plume lets Specter Knight float for a short time, which helps with platforming, and the Will Skull recovers your health, now called Will because Specter Knight is kinda dead, by consuming some darkness, which is what Curios use and can be replenished by killing enemies. Instead of a world map, Specter of Torment has a main hub, the Tower of Fate. Red is there for Curios, and you can upgrade your cloak and even your Curios. Along with levels being changed to revolve around Specter Knight's Dash Slash, there are new enemies, new level gimmicks, and more challenges to f**k you over that truly makes Specter of Torment feel like a fresh, new experience. Specter Knight's Will and Darkness are upgraded by finding special Wisp chests in each level. There are new bosses, flashback levels, and more. The level bosses even have new attacks, like changing the terrain, different behavior, and in the case of Plague Knight, clones of himself. If one Plague Knight wasn't chaotic enough, try 2 of them. The writing in Specter of Torment is more somber compared to the other campaigns, but isn't devoid of the Shovel Knight charm. One of the new mechanics in Specter of Torment are rails, which cause Specter Knight to ride on his scythe like a skateboard. If you press up and down while jumping off a rail, you could do fucking skateboard tricks. Tony Hawk Pro Skater, anyone? The dancer appears in the Tower of Fate, and of course, Specter Knight purposely ignores her, and him doing this unlocks the Cold Shoulder, which allows him to be even edgier. Aside from the funny, Specter of Torment is much darker and absolutely heartbreaking, delving into Specter Knight's past before he ended up a servant to the Enchantress. There are flashback scenes to Specter Knight, then named Donovan, before his death, adventuring with his partner Luan and going to the Tower of Fate to find a magical amulet. Specter of Torment also has remixes of tracks in all of the levels, which are absolutely fantastic. My favorite track in all of Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is Hidden by Night, the music that plays in the Lich Yard in Specter of Torment and earlier in the video. So this is what happens when you remove the G from Graveyard. I give Shovel Knight Specter of Torment a 10 out of 10. Specter of Torment takes the world of Shovel Knight and swaps the previous player character for a more aggressive, aerial-based character, which creates satisfying and fast-paced gameplay. The darker tone of the game was also refreshing compared to the previous two campaigns, which were relatively whimsical. The new level gimmicks and boss patterns kept things very interesting. The first time Black Knight showed up with a turtle steed called f***ing Terrorpin? That was a real surprise, and I didn't actually know what to do against the boss now that he had a turtle. The rest of the game kept me on my toes, and I didn't know what else to expect from Specter of Torment. Specter of Torment's story almost got me to cry at the end. I have to commend Yacht Club Games for writing such an emotional tale. Specter of Torment is a bit on the shorter end, lasting me only around 4 hours compared to the previous two campaigns' 6, but to me, it's the most enjoyable of all the campaigns. So the edgelords really were onto something. King of Cards takes place before Specter of Torment, so it's chronologically the first in Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. King of Cards follows King Knight, who wishes to become the King of Cards, and to do so, he must defeat the 3 Joustus judges across the land. So King Knight leaves his home and his mother, and thus begins our final campaign. Yeah, there's no partner to save, no ultimate potion to create, no humanity to regain. King Knight just wants to win a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. King of Cards takes a more traditional approach to platformers with 3 different worlds and shorter but more plentiful levels, and the major bosses, the Joustus judges, are present at the end of each world. King Knight's main form of attack is the Shoulder Bash, which is pretty straightforward. Then he becomes a Beyblade. If King Knight strikes something with his Shoulder Bash, whether it be certain walls, enemies, or objects, he springs up high and enters a twirling motion, which acts like Shovel Knight's Shovel Drop, but it keeps on going until he touches the ground or cancels it into another Shoulder Bash. There's also a roll attack, which can be done after another Shoulder Bash, and basically cancels the twirl King Knight goes into. King Knight plays and even is kinda like Wario. A big, arrogant man wearing yellow, fueled by greed, and only does good things for his own gain with a Shoulder Bash attack? Yeah, that's Wario. Now, if only King Knight harnessed the power of toilet humor to defeat his enemies. The Shoulder Bash and Spin enable some creative platforming segments, but I found King Knight to be the least fun of the 4 knights. King Knight still offers unique gameplay, but compared to Shovel Knight's simple yet satisfying Shovel Drop, Plague Knight's slight complexity, quick air mobility and destructiveness, and Specter Knight's speedy, precise gameplay, King Knight isn't as interesting as the other 3. The twirl after a Shoulder Bash can also feel slow at times, even though it rarely breaks your momentum due to levels being designed around it. While you can cancel it with a roll, the input for the roll feels clunky and isn't exactly intuitive, though I can understand that it's done to have the controls work on an NES controller. This makes King Knight feel kinda slow to play compared to the other knights, even though he's the only one with an armor set that actually allows him to run, which admittedly does help. King Knight once again has items in the form of heirlooms that use Vigor, which is similar to Shovel Knight's item meter. You can buy them in certain levels with merit medals, which are like the red skulls. King Knight's heirlooms look cool, are pretty unique, and are not as situational as relics or arcana, but of course, there's always one item that outshines the rest. For damn near the entire playthrough, I basically only used the Bubble Frog, which allows King Knight to float for a short time and reset his Shoulder Bash, which acts as a way to save yourself from a death pit, and only during boss fights and mini-bosses is when I switch to the other heirlooms. The heirlooms look awesome. The coolest ones allow him to dash forward with a Scepter Slash, spin into the air and plunge downwards with a sword, which produces a wave of flames, and a counterattack. I would ask if King Knight was actually Ike instead of Wario, but King Knight definitely doesn't fight for his friends. Along with returning level gimmicks from Shovel of Hope and Specter of Torment, King of Cards introduces even more challenges. Once again, there are new enemies, and levels are redesigned to take advantage of King Knight's spin, but this time, there are entirely new levels as well. This makes King of Cards the campaign with the most variety in levels, even though there are multiple levels that take place in the same area. Despite not really liking how King Knight controls, I find that the level design did make up for it in that it has new content not in the other campaigns, and that it's tailored around King Knight, so at least you aren't fighting against levels designed for a completely different character. King Knight has both a world map and a hub area, the Glidewing. The Glidewing is an airship owned by a rooster, a flightless bird, and is piloted by a deer, which can't fly unless you're Santa Claus, so I'm sure this thing is safe. The Glidewing initially has a few people on it, but later on, more characters both old and new board the Glidewing, and it goes from kinda quiet to a very lively airship. There's a lot of stuff available on the Glidewing. There are the standard armor upgrades, King Knight's mom makes you pies to increase your health and vigor, and a chicken sells permanent abilities to King Knight, like a stronger roll move and giving you a cry button. King Knight doesn't dance like Plague Knight, doesn't do a cool pose like Specter Knight, no, he cries. And it heals you. Crying is done incredibly well. You can heal up to 5 hearts before you die or clear the level, and it takes a while to start healing, so it doesn't break the game, but it's still very helpful. Well, since this campaign is called the King of Cards, there's of course a card game. In every world and the Glidewing, there are opponents you can duel in a game of Joustus. Your goal is to claim more gems than your opponent. You can place cards on any tile that isn't a graveyard tile or occupied by a gem. The arrows on the card indicate which direction it can push other cards, so you can push your own or your opponent's cards onto or off of gems. And you can't push in the direction if there's an arrow opposing you. There are gimmicks like double arrows which can push even if there's a regular arrow blocking it, bomb cards, and cards that do a and convert any pushed cards into the opposite team. The game ends if no more moves can be made or the board is filled. If you win, you take an opponent's card, and if you lose, the opponent actually takes a card and uses it against you if you rematch them. Obviously you can get the card back by taking it back from the opponent or buying it back from Chester, since Joustus would be absolutely brutal if this weren't the case. That's really cool since most games don't really punish you even if the lore says there's a punishment for losing the game, but Joustus ain't no pussy. Joustus is deceptively simple, very fun and addicting, and completely optional. Huh? The rules in the Joustus tournament didn't specify you had to defeat the Joustus judges in Joustus, so King Knight uses that loophole to bash their faces in. You could go through the entire game without playing Joustus once. Huh? It's the King of Cards, not King of elbowing people in the face. Why is it optional? Okay, I've seen some people grateful that it's optional since they didn't really like Joustus, and yeah, Shovel Knight is a platformer. No one plays Hearthstone to play a dating sim. They play Hearthstone because it took their soul, but I'm a pretty big fan of card games. Uno. And I feel like it would have been better if there were more of a reward for playing Joustus than just some extra treasure. Maybe if it unlocked some extra levels or stories to give more of an incentive to play the game than just, I like card games, so I play the card game. Joustus feels like a selling point at the back of the box of a video game, only for it to be a plot-irrelevant minigame. King Knight is a jackass, but yeah, he's just a jackass. And I kinda like it. King of Cards' story is the most whimsical and lighthearted, with many character interactions that aren't exactly serious. King Knight is a terrible influence on people. He's vain, self-centered, and obnoxious, but my god, he's hilarious. King Knight acting like a rebellious teenager towards his mom is especially hilarious, but sometimes he really pushes it into, god damn it, not this bullshit again, this motherfucker is an annoying sack of fucking shit territory. It'll definitely come to bite him in the ass later. I give King of Cards a 7 out of 10. King of Cards is the most polished of the Shovel Knight campaigns, with ambitious ideas, new assets, and new music tracks. There's a lot of content available, with the game being the longest of the 3 campaigns, lasting me around 10 hours, and the writing is hilarious, but King Knight isn't as interesting to play as compared to the other 3 knights, and I feel like Joustus should have had more importance, since it's what the storyline is built off of, but King of Cards is a very enjoyable experience nonetheless. Shovel Knight Showdown is a platform fighting game that you probably forgot about. It was a part of the stretch goals as a battle mode, but later got more content added, and it became its own thing. You start off with a few characters and stages, and unlock more as you play the game or the story mode. The story takes place shortly after Specter of Torment, and just before Shovel of Hope and Plague of Shadows, but I can't really talk about it because spoilers. The story follows the character that you choose to play as, with some of them being connected, but you're not really here for me to talk about Shovel Knight Showdown's story, it's a fighting game. Shovel Knight Showdown is a very simple fighting game, with each character having around 2 or 3 moves. The playable knights have their movesets transferred over from their campaigns, while all the other characters get original playable movesets. There are many modes and rules available. You could either go with chaotic 4-player games, with the winner being decided by whoever collects the most gems, or Celestial Plane, no items, Liquid Samurai only. While I'm not normally a fan of campy zoner characters in fighting games, I found myself enjoying Plague Knight and Mona quite a bit, with their bomb bursts being great movement options and fun projectiles. Yeah, you can play lame by running away and throwing out projectiles, so it really is a platform fighter. However, my one true main in Shovel Knight Showdown is Propeller Knight, for the sole reason that he can f***ing spike you. Shovel Knight Showdown gets a 5 out of 10. Shovel Knight's gameplay doesn't really translate well into a fighting game, but I can appreciate the amount of effort it took to make this happen. The stages are based on locations in the game, and the characters are all very faithful to their main story counterparts. I didn't really enjoy story mode that much. It's like Smash Melee's classic mode, with matches against random opponents on set formats like a team battle with Treasure Clash, and then a Break the Targets game that does not play nicely at all, and a final boss. I played through story mode once as Plague Knight, and did not do it again. Shovel Knight Showdown is a cute little experience with local multiplayer, but it's not something I'd really go back to. I give Shovel Knight Treasure Trove a 10 out of 10. My favorite of the 4 campaigns is easily Specter of Torment, followed by Shovel of Hope, and then by points it's a tie between Plague of Shadows and King of Cards, but I slightly prefer Plague of Shadows. This is a throwback classic game done right. Yacht Club Games did a fantastic job both with creating Shovel Knight and being able to follow through with their Kickstarter. Not one of the stretch goals were half-assed, and Shovel Knight itself follows through with the expectations of fans as a game, and it definitely paid off. Shovel Knight is seen in a surprising amount of games that aren't his own, including being an assist trophy in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Shovel Knight is widely considered to be one of the greatest indie games to have been made, and the team behind Shovel Knight went above and beyond. What was originally promised as playable boss knights turned into fully fledged campaigns, and there was a lot of work put into the game to have amazing graphics, fantastic music, charming characters, and polish on everything. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is filled with lovely little touches and extras, like having cheat codes like games of the past. There are cheat codes for unlocking everything, added difficulty, references to other games, and the best thing ever, butt mode. Butt mode replaces words like shovel and knight with the word butt, which makes even the most serious interactions hilarious. If a profile has a cheat code activated, there's a pumpkin symbol on the profile. Cheater cheater, pumpkin eater. There's an additional challenge mode that tests your mastery over the games, and many achievements that range from practicing proper campfire safety to beating the entire game without dying. Achievement indeed, that's something that goes on your gaming resume. Shovel Knight Treasure Trove is an unforgettable game that looks good, sounds good, and is just plain fun, with the game not being too hard, but not too easy, perfect for casual and die-hard gamers. I highly recommend it to anyone looking for an NES throwback title, a good platforming game, or just a good game in general. Games on Kickstarter really are a mixed bag. There are games like Shovel Knight and Undertale, genre-defining masterpieces, and in the case of Undertale in more ways than one, and then in comes Mighty No. 9 with its trailer insulting anime fans and saying the word dash more times than there were people excited for Mighty No. 9 after this trailer.
And make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
This is genuinely the worst advertisement I have ever seen, and the game itself isn't much better. How is it even allowed to launch in this condition after receiving almost $4 million in pledges? They didn't even follow through with the f***ing stretch goals. Well, Shovel Knight has taught me a great lesson. and it's that you can really find something good out of a place seemingly filled with trash, and that maybe I've been doing things all wrong. Sorry, old friend, but there's a new weapon in town. Now excuse me, but someone's been trying to rob my house for the past 28 minutes, so I'm gonna have to go. Get the f*** over here!